The gavel struck with the finality of a coffin nail. The sound reverberated through Courtroom 7B of the Cook County Courthouse, silencing the murmurs that had filled the room moments before. Judge Raymond Holbrook's face remained impassive as he delivered the words that would shatter Maria Alvarez's world. Bail is set at $200,000. Maria felt her knees buckle. The public defender beside her, a harried young woman with dark circles under her eyes and a caseload that would crush Atlas, placed a steadying hand on her arm. "Ms. Alvarez, we should discuss payment options," the lawyer whispered, but her voice sounded distant, as if Maria were underwater. $200,000. She'd be lucky to scrape together $2,000. The math was simple and devastating. She was going to prison. And Thomas. What would happen to Thomas? 3 weeks earlier, Maria Alvarez squeezed her eyes shut as she turned the key in the ignition of her 20-year-old Toyota. The engine sputtered 3 times before finally catching like it did every morning. 3 more payments, and the car would be hers, free and clear. Though with the hours being cut at the hospital where she worked as a janitor, even those modest payments stretched her thin. The digital clock on the dashboard read 5:17 a.m. Her shift didn't start until 7, but Maria had a stop to make first. She always did. The thermos of coffee sloshed in the cup holder as she navigated the potholed streets of South Chicago. A brown paper bag containing a ham sandwich, an apple, and a granola bar sat on the passenger seat. 15 years of the same routine, give or take a few variations on the sandwich filling. She'd started bringing breakfast to Thomas the day after she found him huddled in the alley behind St. Michael's Church, where she attended Mass every Sunday. He had been so thin, his army jacket hanging off his frame like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. His eyes, though, they'd held something that resonated with Maria. A dignity that life had tried to beat out of him, but hadn't quite succeeded. The radio crackled with the morning news as Maria waited at a red light. The city was experiencing its coldest November in decades. 3 homeless people had frozen to death last week alone. The announcer moved on to a story about Edwin Blackwell, the billionaire real estate mogul who had just announced plans for a luxury development in South Chicago. Revitalizing the neighborhood, the announcer said, though Maria knew what that really meant. More people like Thomas pushed out of the few safe spaces they'd managed to carve out for themselves. The light turned green, and Maria pushed the grim thoughts away. Today was not a day for politics or anger. Today was Thursday, which meant payday, which meant she could add an extra treat to Thomas's breakfast bag. She'd picked up a chocolate bar yesterday, the good kind, with hazelnuts. Thomas had mentioned once, years ago, that he missed Nutella. This wasn't quite the same, but it was the closest she could manage. Thomas would be waiting at the corner of 47th and Ellis, same as always. Rain or shine, bitter cold or sweltering heat, he was there. They had their routine. But as Maria approached the familiar corner, something was wrong. Thomas wasn't in his usual spot against the wall of the abandoned hardware store. Instead, 2 police officers stood there, one speaking into a radio while the other took notes. Maria's heart skipped. She parked haphazardly, not bothering to feed the meter, and hurried across the street. "Excuse me," she called to the officers. "What's happened? Where's Thomas?" The taller officer, a woman with tired eyes, looked up from her notepad. "You know, the homeless man who stays here?" "His name is Thomas," Maria said firmly. "Thomas Walker. He's a veteran, Vietnam." The officers exchanged glances. "Ma'am, there was an incident last night. Someone attacked several homeless individuals in the area." Maria's hand flew to her mouth. Is Thomas?" He's alive, the officer said quickly. But he's been taken to County General, pretty badly beaten. The world tilted under Maria's feet. She steadied herself against a parking meter.
I need to go to him. Are you family? A hollow laugh escaped her. I've brought him breakfast every day for 15 years. I'm the closest thing to family he has in this world. The female officer's expression softened. I can't officially tell
you this, but they're holding him for observation in the ER, bed 14. Maria thanked them and rushed back to her car, the breakfast she'd packed now forgotten on the seat beside her. She'd be late for work, might even lose her job, but in that moment, nothing mattered except getting to Thomas. County General loomed, like a grimy concrete fortress as Maria parked in the visitor's lot. She'd worked at St. Elizabeth's across town for 12 years, but hospitals were hospitals, all sterile corridors and the sharp tang of disinfectant masking the underlying sense of suffering. She found him easily enough, bed 14 in the ER, just as the officer had said. A thin curtain provided the illusion of privacy. Thomas looked smaller somehow, diminished against the white hospital sheets. His face was a landscape of bruises, one eye swollen shut. An IV dripped steadily into his arm. "Oh, Thomas," Maria whispered, pulling up a plastic chair beside the bed. His good eye fluttered open, focusing slowly on her face. "Maria." His voice was a rasp. "Didn't mean to mess up our breakfast date." She fought back tears. "I brought your coffee, but I left it in the car." "It's okay. They got me on the good stuff here anyway." He gestured weakly toward the IV. Maria took his weathered hand in hers, careful to avoid the bandages covering raw knuckles. "The police said... They said someone attacked homeless people last night?" Thomas nodded slightly, wincing at the movement. "Some rich kids, drunk, thought it'd be fun to clean up the neighborhood," they said. He attempted a smile that looked more like a grimace. "I gave as good as I got, though. One of them's going to have a hard time explaining his broken nose to..."
"Daddy, did they catch them? Yeah? Cops got them, but what?"
Thomas's eye darted away from hers. "One of the kids, his old man's Edwin Blackwell." Maria felt her blood run cold. Everyone in Chicago knew Edwin Blackwell, real estate tycoon, political kingmaker, owner of half the buildings downtown. His son, Preston, was a frequent feature in tabloids, usually photographed falling out of nightclubs or crashing expensive cars. "The cops were acting weird," Thomas continued. "Supervisor came in, took statements, but I heard them talking. They're already calling it mutual combat, saying we provoked them." A bitter laugh escaped him. 4 drunk college kids against 3 homeless vets. "Yeah, we really had the advantage." Maria squeezed his hand. "We'll figure this out. I'll talk to Father Reyes. He knows people." The curtain rustled, and a young doctor stepped in, clipboard in hand. He frowned when he saw Maria. "Visiting hours haven't started yet," he said, not unkindly. "Are you family?" Before Maria could answer, Thomas spoke up. "She's my daughter." The doctor's eyebrows rose as he looked between the elderly white man and the middle-aged Latina woman, but he didn't comment. "Well, Mr. Walker, your x-rays show no broken bones, which is fortunate, but I'm concerned about possible internal bleeding. We'd like to keep you for observation for at least 24 hours. Thomas was already shaking his head. "Can't afford it, Doc. Just patch me up and I'll be on my way." "Sir, I really must insist." "It's fine," Maria interrupted. "I'll pay." Both men turned to look at her. "Maria, no," Thomas protested. "Your granddaughter's tuition..." "Hush," she said firmly. "Lucia has a scholarship for next semester. We'll manage." The doctor looked uncomfortable, but nodded. "I'll have the billing department send you the forms." He made a few notes on his clipboard and left. Maria sat with Thomas until a nurse came. to take him for more tests. She promised to return that evening, then hurried out to her car. She was already 2 hours late for work. The hospital where Maria worked was understaffed and overworked, same as every other hospital in the city. St. Elizabeth's had once been a prestigious institution, but years of budget cuts had left it struggling. The cleaning staff had been hit particularly hard. Maria now did the work that 3 people had done when she started. As expected, her supervisor was furious. "Third time this month, Alvarez," he snapped, not looking up from his computer. "I've got people begging for jobs who can actually show up on time." "My friend was in the hospital," Maria began. "He was attacked." "Save it," he cut her off. "I've got orders to reduce staff anyway. Consider this your 2 weeks' notice." Maria stood frozen, her cleaning cart half assembled. "Frank, please." "I've been here 12 years. My grandson's medical bills, not my problem." He finally looked up, his expression softening slightly. "Look, I'll give you a decent reference. But management's breathing down my neck about the budget. Someone's got to go." She finished her shift in a daze, mechanically emptying trash cans and mopping floors. Without this job, she'd fall behind on rent. Without rent, she'd lose her apartment. Without her apartment, where would Lucia and little Miguel live while Lucia finished nursing school? Maria had raised her granddaughter since Lucia was 7, after her daughter and son-in-law died in a car crash. Now 22, Lucia was in her final year of nursing school, working nights at a diner and raising her 4-year-old son, Miguel. The boy had been diagnosed with asthma last year, and the medication strained their already tight budget. But Maria had always managed. Somehow she'd always found a way to keep the lights on, food on the table, and Miguel's inhaler filled. Now though, as Maria clocked out, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Alvarez, this is Detective Sarah Lowell from Chicago PD. Please call me regarding the Thomas Walker assault case." Maria's hands shook as she dialed the number. "Ms. Alvarez," the detective answered promptly. "Thank you for calling back. I understand you're close with Mr. Walker?" "Yes," Maria confirmed. "Is something wrong? Has he gotten worse?" "No, nothing like that. But there's been a development in the case. The district attorney is considering pressing charges." Maria felt a flicker of hope. "Against the boys who did this? Good." A pause. "Actually, Ms. Alvarez, the charges would be against Mr. Walker and the other homeless men."
"Aggravated assault. What?" Maria nearly shouted into the phone. "That's insane! They were defending themselves." One of the young men, Preston Blackwell, claims they were just walking by when Mr. Walker and his friends demanded money and then attacked them when they refused. That's a lie. Nevertheless, Mr. Blackwell has a broken nose and a concussion. His father is pressing for charges. Maria leaned against the wall, suddenly dizzy. "This isn't right." "No," Detective Lowell agreed quietly. "It isn't. But I thought you should know, Mr. Walker will be discharged tomorrow, and there's a strong
possibility he'll be taken into custody." After hanging up, Maria sat in her car for a long time, staring at nothing. Then, with sudden resolve, she started the engine and drove to St. Michael's Church. Father Reyes was in his office when Maria arrived, working on Sunday's sermon. He looked up with a smile that quickly faded when he saw her expression. "Maria? What's wrong?" She told him everything. Thomas's attack, the looming charges, her lost job. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down her face. Father Reyes listened gravely. When she finished, he sighed heavily. "Edwin Blackwell is a powerful man, Maria. And his son, well, this wouldn't be the first time Preston's misdeeds have been swept under the rug."
"So we do nothing?" Maria demanded. "Thomas goes to jail for being attacked?" "I didn't say that." Father Reyes reached for his phone. "I know a lawyer who works with the Homeless Advocacy Center, and I have a friend at the Tribune. At the very
Least we can make some noise. Maria left the church feeling marginally better. Father Reyes had always been a good man. If anyone could help, it would be him. She stopped at the grocery store on her way home, carefully selecting items on sale. As she checked out, she calculated the total in her head, a habit from years of stretching every dollar. The cashier, a young woman with kind eyes, noticed her counting. "Rough day?" she asked, bagging Maria's groceries. "You could say that," Maria replied with a tired smile. "Well, here's a little something." The cashier slipped a coupon for $10 off into the bag. "It's not much, but maybe it helps." Maria thanked her, touched by the small kindness. It reminded her of why she'd first stopped to help Thomas all those years ago. Small acts of goodness mattered, especially in a world that often seemed to run on cruelty and indifference. Her apartment building was a 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that real estate agents euphemistically called transitional. The elevator had been broken for months, so Maria trudged up the stairs, grocery bags cutting into her arms. Lucia was at the kitchen table when Maria entered, textbooks spread out around her, a cup of cold coffee at her elbow. She looked up with a smile that quickly faded. "Abuela?" "What's wrong?" Maria set down the groceries and collapsed into a chair. For the second time that day, she recounted the morning's events. Lucia listened, her expression growing increasingly distressed. "They're charging Thomas? That's ridiculous. He's the gentlest person I know." "It's that Blackwell boy," Maria said, wearily. "His father has the mayor in his pocket. What are we going to do?" Maria reached across the table and squeezed her granddaughter's hand. "We'll figure it out. Father Reyes is helping. How's Miguel?" "Sleeping. His cough was bad last night, but the new inhaler seems to be working better." They spoke in hushed tones, not wanting to wake the child. Lucia would need to leave for her shift at the diner soon. Maria would watch Miguel until morning, when Lucia returned from work. They had perfected this routine over the years, like dancers who knew every step by heart. As they talked, Maria's phone rang again. It was Detective Lowell. "Ms. Alvarez, I wanted to let you know that I've been removed from the Walker case." "What? Why?" "Officially, it's being called a reassignment due to caseload." "Unofficially," the detective lowered her voice, "this is coming from very high up. I'm sorry." After hanging up, Maria felt the weight of defeat pressing down on her. She'd lived in Chicago her entire life. She knew how the system worked. People like Thomas, people like her, were disposable. Their stories could be rewritten to suit the powerful, but Maria wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. That evening, when Lucia left for work, Maria settled Miguel with a bedtime story. The boy drifted off to sleep, his breathing slightly labored but steady. Maria pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead before closing his bedroom door. Instead of going to bed herself, she sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. At the top, she wrote Thomas Walker Defense Fund. Beneath it, she began listing everyone she knew who might be able to contribute: friends from church, former co-workers, neighbors. It wasn't a long list. By the time Maria returned to the hospital that evening, a storm was brewing, both literally as thunder rumbled over the Chicago skyline and figuratively as she entered Thomas's room to find Detective Lowell arguing with a man in an expensive suit. "Ms. Alvarez," Detective Lowell acknowledged her. "This is Gregory Pierce, Mr. Blackwell's attorney." Pierce turned cold eyes toward Maria. "Ms. Alvarez, I understand you've been making some calls." "I've been trying to prevent an injustice," Maria replied, moving to stand beside Thomas's bed. "Your client's son attacked my friend. Pierce smiled thinly. That's not how Preston remembers it, and unfortunately for your friend, the word of 4 college students tends to carry more weight than the ramblings of homeless vagrants. Thomas is a decorated veteran, Maria said through gritted teeth, who hasn't contributed to society in decades, Pierce countered smoothly. Now I've come with an offer. Mr. Blackwell is prepared to drop the matter entirely if Mr. Walker and his companions agree to relocate. Relocate? Thomas spoke up. To where? Anywhere not in Chicago would be preferable. Maria couldn't believe what she was hearing. You want to banish them for the crime of being assaulted? Pierce shrugged. Consider it a win-win. They get a fresh start somewhere else and Preston avoids the inconvenience of a trial.
Get out, Maria said quietly. Excuse me? Get out of this room, she repeated, her voice stronger. Thomas isn't going anywhere, and neither am I. After Pierce left, Detective Lowell gave Maria a respectful nod. For what it's worth, I believe you and Mr. Walker, but this is going to get ugly. She wasn't wrong. The next morning, Thomas was discharged from the hospital and immediately arrested.
The same happened to the other 2 survivors of the attack, both fellow Vietnam veterans who'd fallen on hard times. Maria watched, helpless, as they were loaded into a police car. Father Reyes stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. The lawyers, meeting them at the station, he assured her. And my friend at the Tribune is running a story tomorrow. But Maria knew it wouldn't be enough. Not against the Blackwell machine. As she got into her car to follow the police to the station, her phone rang. It was the hospital billing department. Thomas's one-day stay had cost $4,700. Payment was due in 30 days. Maria rested her forehead against the steering wheel and, for the first time since this nightmare began, allowed herself to cry. The next few days passed in a blur. The promised Tribune article appeared, but it was small, buried on page 16, while the Blackwell version of events made the front page of the rival Sun-Times. Privileged youth attacked by homeless gang. Maria started a GoFundMe for Thomas's legal defense, but it had raised only $740 so far, nowhere near enough for a private attorney. Father Reyes had reached out to every contact he had, but the response was always the same: sympathy without action. Thomas and his friends were being held at Cook County Jail, unable to make bail. Maria visited every day, bringing what small comforts she could: clean socks, a paperback Western novel Thomas had mentioned liking, chocolate bars for all 3 men. On her 4th visit, Thomas looked different, deflated somehow, resigned. The jail had aged him 10 years in less than a week. "How are you holding up?" Maria asked, trying to keep her voice cheerful. Thomas attempted a smile. "Been worse. Food's better than Nam at least." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Listen, Maria. You need to stop coming here." "What?" The lawyer told us what they're planning. Blackwell's team is going to drag this out. Make it as expensive and painful as possible. They're investigating.
Everyone connected to us looking for leverage. Maria felt a chill. "What do you mean, leverage?" Thomas hesitated. "They're suggesting that you might be involved too, that you've been, I don't know, running some kind of scheme with us." "That's ridiculous." "Of course it is, but these people, they don't play fair. I don't want you getting caught up in this mess." Maria reached across the table, taking Thomas's hands in hers. "I'm already caught up in it, and I'm not abandoning you now." As she left the jail, Maria noticed a black SUV parked across the street.
A man with a camera was inside, and he raised it as she passed. She quickened her pace, heart pounding. That night, when she returned home, Lucia met her at the door, face pale. "Abuela, there was a man here asking questions about you and Thomas. He said he was from the district attorney's office, but he wouldn't show me any ID. He kept asking if you kept things for Thomas, if he ever gave you packages to hold. Maria sank onto the couch. They're trying to build a case against me too. But why? You haven't done anything, because I'm the only one speaking up for Thomas. If they can silence me. Lucia sat beside her grandmother, taking her hand. What do we do? Maria didn't have an answer. The next morning, Maria woke to pounding on her apartment door. She opened it to find 2 police officers standing there, faces grim. "Maria Alvarez?" one asked. "Yes, that's me. We have a warrant for your arrest." The world seemed to tilt. Arrest? For what? Obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy to commit fraud. What evidence? What fraud?
I don't understand, but they were already reading her rights, already turning her around to place handcuffs on her wrists. Lucia appeared in the hallway, Miguel clutching her leg, eyes wide with fear. "Abuela?" The child's voice was small and confused. "It's okay, mi amor," Maria called over her shoulder as they led her away. "Lucia, call Father Reyes. Tell him what's happened. It's going to be okay."
But as they escorted her down the stairs, past her gawking neighbors, Maria wasn't sure it would be okay at all. The processing at the police station was humiliating. Fingerprints, mugshot, personal items placed in a plastic bag. Maria answered their questions mechanically, still not understanding what she was supposed to have done. Finally, she was placed in a holding cell with 3 other women. One was clearly in the throes of withdrawal, rocking back and forth on the bench. Another looked like she belonged in a boardroom, her expensive suit now rumpled, mascara streaked down her face. The third was barely more than a girl, probably, Lucia's age, staring at the wall with empty eyes. Hours passed. Maria wondered what Lucia had told Miguel, how the boy would understand his grandmother being taken away in handcuffs. She wondered if Thomas knew what had happened. Eventually, a guard came to escort her to an interview room. Father Reyes was waiting there, along with a young woman in a sharp suit, Maria. Father Reyes embraced her briefly. "This is Anita Kapoor from the Legal Aid Society. She's going to represent you." Ms. Kapoor shook Maria's hand firmly. "Ms. Alvarez, I want you to know that these charges are extremely flimsy. They're claiming you destroyed evidence related to the assault case, but they won't specify what evidence." "Because there is no evidence," Maria said, voice cracking. "Thomas and his friends were the victims, not the attackers." "I believe you," Ms. Kapoor assured her. "But we're facing an uphill battle. The Blackwell family has considerable influence, and they seem determined to make an example of anyone who challenges their narrative." "What about Lucia and Miguel? Are they okay?" Father Reyes nodded. "They're staying with me at the rectory for now. Miguel's asking a lot of questions, but Lucia is handling it well." "Your arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning," Ms. Kapoor explained. "We'll request that bail be set at a reasonable amount, but... The lawyer's expression was grim. "The prosecutor is pushing for a high bail, claiming you're a flight risk." "A flight risk? I've lived in the same apartment for 20 years. My family is here." "I know, and we'll argue that. But you should prepare yourself for the possibility that bail might be set higher than you can afford." Maria nodded slowly, the reality of her situation sinking in. She might be going to jail, not for a few hours or days, but for weeks or months while awaiting trial. She might lose her apartment, her few possessions. Lucia might have to drop out of school to care for Miguel full-time and Thomas. What would happen to Thomas without her voice speaking for him? The arraignment the next morning was brief and brutal. The prosecutor painted Maria as a key participant in an elaborate scheme, claiming that Thomas and the other homeless men had been shaking down students and tourists for years, with Maria allegedly handling the money and providing alibis. It was so absurd that Maria would have laughed if the situation weren't so serious. The idea that Thomas, gentle, dignified Thomas, who refused to accept so much as a $5 bill from her, insisting that the breakfast she brought was more than enough, was running some kind of criminal enterprise was beyond ridiculous. But the judge wasn't laughing. He listened to the prosecutor with grave attention, nodding occasionally. When Ms. Kapoor presented her counter-arguments, highlighting Maria's deep community ties and clean record, he seemed almost bored. Then came the moment that would echo in Maria's memory, replaying in her darkest hours. The gavel struck with the finality of a coffin nail. The sound reverberated through Courtroom 7B of the Cook County Courthouse, silencing the murmurs that had filled the room moments before. Judge Raymond Holbrook's face remained impassive as he delivered the words that would shatter Maria Alvarez's world. Bail is set at $200,000. Maria felt her knees buckle. The public defender beside her, a harried young woman, with dark circles under her eyes and a caseload that would crush Atlas, placed a steadying hand on her arm. "Ms. Alvarez, we should discuss payment options," the lawyer whispered, but her voice sounded distant, as if Maria were underwater.
$200,000.
She'd be lucky to scrape together 2,000. The math was simple and devastating. She was going to prison. And Thomas? What would happen to Thomas? As the court officers approached to take her back into custody, Maria caught sight of a figure in the back row of the gallery. A tall man in an expensive suit, silver hair immaculately styled, watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. Edwin Blackwell himself had come to witness her downfall. Their eyes met briefly. Maria expected to see triumph or contempt in his gaze, but instead she saw something else, something that, in her shock and despair, she couldn't quite identify. Then the moment passed. The officers were beside her, gently but firmly taking her arms. Ms. Kapoor was promising to visit her later that day to discuss options. Father Reyes was calling out that he would look after Lucia and Miguel, and then Maria was being led away, back to a cell, away from her family, away from Thomas, away from the simple life she had built with such care and dignity. As she passed the last row of the gallery, though, a strange thing happened. Edwin Blackwell stood up, and for a brief moment their paths crossed. In that moment, so quickly Maria thought she might have imagined it. He leaned forward and whispered a single word. "Wait." Before Maria could process what had happened, she was through the door and back in the holding area. It wasn't until she was alone in her cell that she had time to wonder about that whispered word. Had she imagined it? And if not, what could it possibly mean? The hours crawled by. Maria sat on the thin mattress of her cell, hands folded in her lap, trying to pray but finding the words sticking in her throat. What kind of God allowed such injustice? What kind of system punished the poor for being victims? She thought of Thomas, somewhere in this same building, perhaps wondering why she hadn't visited. She thought of Miguel, his small face scrunched, in confusion as he tried to understand why the police had taken his abuela away. She thought of Lucia, bearing the weight of it all, trying to finish school while caring for her son and worrying about her grandmother. Maria had always prided herself on her strength, her resilience. She had weathered the loss of her husband, to cancer, the tragic deaths of her daughter and son-in-law, the challenges of raising a granddaughter alone, the constant struggle to make ends meet. But now She felt a weariness that sank deep into her bones. Perhaps this was one battle too many. A guard appeared at her cell door. "Alvarez, your lawyer's here." Maria followed the guard to the same interview room as before. Ms. Kapoor was waiting, but this time she wasn't alone. A tall, impeccably dressed man stood beside her, his silver hair catching the harsh fluorescent light. Edwin Blackwell. Maria stopped in the doorway, confusion and anger warring within her. "What is he doing here?" Ms. Kapoor looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Blackwell has a proposition for you, Ms. Alvarez." "I'm not interested in his propositions," Maria said coldly. "This man's son attacked my friend, and now he's trying to frame us all." Blackwell raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Ms. Alvarez, I understand your anger, but I'm asking for 5 minutes of your time. After that, if you want me to leave, I will." Something in his tone, a note of what sounded almost like desperation, made Maria hesitate. Finally, she nodded and took a seat across from him. 5 minutes. Blackwell sat down, folding his hands on the table. Up close, Maria could see the fine lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands that his tailored suit and commanding presence almost managed to hide. "Ms. Alvarez, I've made a terrible mistake," he began, his voice low and strained. "Several mistakes, actually, over many years. But the worst was believing my son when he came home that night with a broken nose, claiming he'd been attacked." Maria said nothing, watching him warily. "Preston has problems," Blackwell continued. "Addiction issues, anger issues. He's been in and out of rehab for years. I've protected him, covered for him, paid off people he's hurt."
"I thought I was helping him, but I was just enabling him." He drew a deep breath. "When Preston came home that night, I didn't question his story. I immediately called my attorney, set the machinery in motion to protect him. It's what I've
"Always done? And now?" Maria asked quietly. "Now I know the truth. Preston and his friends went looking for trouble that night. They targeted homeless people because they thought no one would care, no one would believe them over 4 wealthy college students." "How do you know this?" Blackwell's mouth twisted in a bitter smile. "Because I installed security cameras in my home after Preston's last incident. The cameras record audio as well as video. I reviewed the footage last night and heard Preston on the phone with one of his friends, laughing about how they'd taught those bums a lesson and how his father would make sure they got away with it." Maria leaned forward. "Do you have this recording?" Blackwell nodded, reaching into his jacket to produce a flash drive. "This contains the footage, along with statements from 2 witnesses who saw the attack but were afraid to come forward. They work for businesses I own, so I was
able to
persuade them to tell the truth." He slid the flash drive across the table. "I've already taken this to the district attorney. The charges against Mr. Walker and his friends will be dropped within the hour, and the charges against you will
also be dropped," Ms. Kapoor interjected, a smile breaking across her face.
"Mr. Blackwell has also agreed to post your bail in the meantime, so you can go home today." Maria stared at the flash drive, then at Blackwell, suspicion warring with hope. Why? Why are you doing this now?" Blackwell was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on his folded hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I recognized Thomas Walker's name when the case first crossed my desk."
"I didn't place it immediately, but it kept nagging at me. Then last night, it hit me." He looked up, meeting Maria's eyes. 15 years ago, I had a breakdown. My first wife had left me, taking our daughter. I was working 18-hour days,
barely sleeping, running on stimulants and alcohol. One night I just broke. I found myself wandering the streets of South Chicago, no wallet, no phone, completely lost. Maria's breath caught. This wasn't where she had expected the conversation to go. I sat down on a sidewalk, not knowing what to do, when a homeless man approached me. Instead of asking for money, he offered me half his sandwich, a sandwich that had been given to him by a young woman earlier that morning. "Thomas," Maria whispered. Blackwell nodded. He shared what little he had with me, a complete stranger. He talked me through my panic attack. He helped me find a payphone to call for help. And when I offered to repay him, he refused. Blackwell's composure cracked slightly. I never forgot that kindness. I tried to find him afterward, to thank him properly, but he'd moved on from that spot. It wasn't until I saw him in that courtroom yesterday, sitting at the defendant's table, that I made the connection. He cleared his throat. "I've come to make amends, Ms. Alvarez. Not just to free you and Mr. Walker, but to right a greater wrong. My company has been buying properties in South Chicago for years, displacing people like Thomas. We've pushed forward with developments that have destroyed communities rather than strengthened them." Skepticism from her voice. "I deserve your doubt," Blackwell acknowledged. "Words are cheap, especially from a man like me. But I'm hoping actions will speak louder." He pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I've established a foundation to provide housing and support services for homeless veterans in Chicago. I'm allocating $20 million as an initial investment, and I'd like you to run it." Maria blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me? You've spent 15 years looking after Thomas Walker, asking nothing in return. That kind of dedication, that kind of compassion, that's exactly what this foundation needs." "I'm a janitor, Mr. Blackwell. I don't know the first thing about running a foundation." "You know more than you think. You understand these men, their needs, their dignity. The rest, the paperwork, the legal requirements, that's what staff is for. And the salary would be substantial, enough to help your granddaughter finish school without working nights, enough for your grandson's medical needs." Maria felt dizzy with the implications, the sudden reversal of fortune. It was too much to process. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course." Blackwell stood. "The offer isn't contingent on your answer today. Either way, you'll be released within the hour, and all charges against you and Mr. Walker will be dropped." After he left, Maria turned to Ms. Kapoor. "Can this be real?" The lawyer smiled. "It appears so. Mr. Blackwell has already posted your bail and submitted exculpatory
evidence to the DA. I've been assured that the paperwork to drop all charges is being processed as we speak."
True to her word, less than an hour later, Maria found herself standing outside the Cook County Courthouse, blinking in the late afternoon sunlight. Father Reyes was waiting with his car to take her home. "It's a miracle," he said, as they drove through the city streets. "When Blackwell's lawyer called me this morning, I could hardly believe it." "It doesn't feel real," Maria admitted. "Any of it. Sometimes grace comes from unexpected places," Father Reyes mused. "Even from billionaires with troubled sons." When they arrived at the rectory, Lucia was waiting on the steps, Miguel in her arms. The boy wriggled free when he saw Maria and ran to her, throwing his small arms around her legs. "Abuela, you came back!" Maria lifted him up, holding him close, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair. "I promised I would, didn't I? I always keep my promises." Over his shoulder, she met Lucia's tearful gaze. Her granddaughter mouthed a silent thank you, though to whom, God, Father Reyes, or even Edwin Blackwell, Maria wasn't sure. That evening, they ate dinner together in Father Reyes's small kitchen, Miguel chattering excitedly about the church's cat that had befriended him, Lucia explaining how her professors had granted her extensions on her assignments given the family emergency. It felt normal, precious in its ordinariness after the chaos of the past days. "What about Thomas?" Lucia
asked as they cleared the dishes. "Has he been released too?" "Not yet," Father Reyes answered. "The paperwork takes longer for multiple defendants, but Mr. Blackwell's attorney assured me he'd be out by tomorrow morning." Maria nodded, already planning. She would make breakfast.
For Thomas, his favorite, eggs and ham with a side of fried potatoes. She would bring it to the jail, be there waiting when he walked out. Some routines were sacred. As she helped Miguel prepare for bed, reading him his favorite story about a bear who finds a lost button, Maria found herself thinking about Blackwell's offer. Could she really run a foundation? Would Thomas and the other veterans even want help from the man whose son had attacked them, whose company had been displacing homeless people for years? But then again, if the money was there, if it could actually help people like Thomas, wasn't it her duty to at least consider it? Miguel fell asleep halfway through the story, his breathing soft and regular against her side. Maria watched him for a while, this innocent child who had never known a life without financial strain, who had grown up in an apartment where the heat sometimes failed in winter and the window AC unit barely functioned in summer. The salary Blackwell had mentioned would change everything for them. Lucia could quit her job at the diner, focus entirely on her studies. They could move to a better apartment, maybe even save for a small house someday. Miguel could have new clothes, better health care, maybe even college savings. Was it selling out to accept such an offer? Or was it simply accepting help when it was offered, the same way she had been helping Thomas all these years? Maria kissed Miguel's forehead and slipped out of the room, closing the door softly behind her. In the kitchen, she found Lucia studying at the table, textbooks spread out around her. "You should sleep," Maria said gently. "You have class in the morning." Lucia looked up with tired eyes. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if Mr. Blackwell hadn't changed his mind. You could have been in jail for months, maybe years." "But I'm not," Maria reminded her. "I'm here. Father Reyes told me about the job offer." Lucia closed her textbook. "Are you going to take it?" Maria sat down across from her granddaughter. "I don't know. What do you think?" "I think..." Lucia chose her words carefully. "I think sometimes opportunity comes in strange packages, and I think no one deserves it more than you." Maria reached across the table, squeezing Lucia's hand. "Let's see what Thomas says. I won't decide anything without talking to him first." The next morning, Maria woke before dawn, the habit of 15 years impossible to break. In Father Reyes's kitchen, she found everything she needed to make Thomas's breakfast. The priest joined her as she was packing it into a paper bag. "I'll drive you to the jail," he offered. "They should be releasing him around 8. They arrived a little before 8, parking across from the imposing building. Maria clutched the paper bag, watching the doors anxiously. 8 o'clock came and went. Then 8:30. "Maybe the paperwork is taking longer than expected," Father Reyes suggested. But Maria sensed something was wrong. "Can you call Mr. Blackwell's lawyer? Ask what's happening." The priest made the call, his expression growing increasingly concerned as he listened to the response. When he hung up, he turned to Maria with grave eyes. Thomas refused to sign the release papers. "What? Why?" "The lawyer doesn't know. Thomas just said he needed to think about it." Maria was out of the car before Father Reyes finished speaking, heading for the jail entrance. Inside, she explained the situation to the desk sergeant, who made a call and then escorted her to an interview.
Room.
Thomas was waiting there, looking somehow older than he had just days before. The jail jumpsuit hung loosely on his thin frame, emphasizing how much weight he'd lost. "Thomas," Maria said, taking the seat across from him. "What's going on? Why won't you sign the papers?" He gave her a tired smile. "Hello to you too, Maria. I heard they let you out yesterday. I'm glad." "Don't change the subject. The charges are being dropped. You can leave today. Why are you still here?" Thomas sighed, rubbing a hand across his face. "It's not that simple. Blackwell's lawyer explained everything, how the son set us up, how the father had a change of heart. But he also told me about the foundation, the housing program. Isn't that a good thing? For who?" Thomas's voice hardened. "For Blackwell?
Who gets to clean his conscience?
For the city, which gets to sweep its homeless problem under a new rug? Or for people like me, who get to trade one form of dependency for another?" Maria frowned. "I don't understand." "Look, Maria, I appreciate what you've done for me all these
years. Those breakfasts, those conversations, they kept me going on my darkest days. But you never tried to fix me. You never made me feel like a problem that needed solving. You treated me like a person, not a project." He leaned forward.
This foundation, it's just another way for the rich to control the poor. Give us housing, but on their terms. Give us support, but make sure we're grateful. Make sure we know our place." "I think you're being unfair," Maria said gently. "Blackwell seems genuinely
remorseful. Maybe he is, or maybe he's just trying to avoid bad publicity. Either way, I won't be his success story.
I won't be paraded around as proof of his generous spirit." Maria placed the paper bag on the table between them. "I brought your breakfast." Thomas looked at it for a long moment, then reached for it with a small smile. "Ham sandwich? Eggs and potatoes today. I thought it was a special occasion." He unwrapped the food carefully, as he always did, savoring each bite. They sat in comfortable silence while he ate, a routine established over 15 years. Finally, Thomas spoke again. "What about you, Maria? Are you going to take the job?" "I don't know," she admitted. "The money would help Lucia and Miguel. And maybe I could do some good." Thomas nodded slowly. "If anyone could make that foundation into something worthwhile, it would be you." He hesitated. "But if you do take it, promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Don't let them change you. Don't let them turn your compassion into charity, your kindness into pity. Keep bringing breakfast to people who need it, not because it's your job, but because it's who you are." Maria felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I promise." Thomas reached across the table, taking her hand in his weathered one. "Then I'll sign the papers, but I'm not taking any of Blackwell's housing. I've managed on my own for decades. I'll keep managing." "Thomas?" "It's my choice, Maria, my dignity. You understand that better than anyone." She did understand, though it broke her heart a little. Thomas Walker was a proud man, and pride was often all that stood between survival and surrender on the streets. After Thomas finally agreed to sign the release papers, Maria waited while he collected his few possessions. Father Reyes had stepped away to take a phone call, so they stood alone on the sidewalk outside the jail. "What will you do now?" Maria asked. Thomas shrugged, adjusting the worn backpack on his shoulder. "Find a new corner, I guess. My old spot's probably taken by now." "You could come stay with us at Father Reyes's rectory just until—" "Maria," Thomas cut her off gently. "I appreciate it. I do, but I need to do this my way." She nodded, respecting his decision even as she worried. "I'll still bring you breakfast." "I'm counting on it." He smiled, the familiar warmth returning to his eyes. You know, for 15 years you've been
asking me what I want in my sandwich, how I like my coffee. No one else bothers with that. What a homeless man wants. They just hand you whatever and expect gratitude. It's just common courtesy, Maria replied.
No, Thomas shook his head. It's dignity. And that's what all this comes down to, isn't it? Blackwell's offering help, but at what cost to our dignity? Father Reyes returned, offering to drive Thomas wherever he wanted to go. The old veteran thought for a moment, then named a church on the north side that ran a day program for homeless veterans. As they drove through the city, Maria found herself seeing it through new eyes. Every corner, every alley potentially held someone like Thomas, someone with a story, someone who had fallen through the cracks of a system that valued property over people. What if the foundation could actually change that? What if, with her at the helm, it could provide help that preserved dignity, that recognized the humanity of every person it served? By the time they dropped Thomas off at the church, Maria had made her decision. She would meet with Blackwell, but on her own terms. She would accept the position only if she had real control, only if the Foundation's mission aligned with her values. That afternoon, Maria called the number Blackwell had left with her. His secretary put her through immediately. "Ms. Alvarez," Blackwell greeted her. "I'm glad you called. Have you had time to consider my offer?" "I have," Maria replied. "I'd like to meet with you to discuss the details. Tomorrow, if possible." "Of course." "My office at 10 a.m. Maria thought of all the intimidating glass towers downtown, how out of place she would feel there in her second-hand clothes. "No, St. Michael's Church, in the community room, 1 p.m. There was a brief silence, then a chuckle. "You're already setting terms, Ms. Alvarez. I appreciate that. St. Michael's at 1 p.m. it is." After hanging up, Maria sat for a long moment, thinking about the strange turns her life had taken in the past week. From janitor to jail to potential foundation director. From bringing Thomas breakfast to potentially changing the lives of hundreds of people like him. She thought of what Thomas had
said about dignity, about the difference between help and charity.
If she took this job, she would have to navigate that difference every day, would have to ensure that in trying to solve problems, they didn't diminish the people behind them. "Is everything okay, Abuela?" Lucia asked, coming into the room with a pile of textbooks. Maria looked up at her granddaughter, this brilliant young woman who had overcome so much, who would soon be a nurse, helping others in her own way. "Yes," Maria said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "I think everything might finally be okay." The next day, as Maria prepared for her meeting with Blackwell, she packed 2 ham sandwiches, one for herself, one for Thomas. No matter what happened with the foundation, no matter how her life might change, some routines were sacred. She would find Thomas after her meeting, share lunch with him as they had shared so many breakfasts. She would tell him about her decision, whatever it turned out to be. And together they would navigate this new chapter. 2 people brought together by simple human kindness, the kind that could, in its quiet way, change everything. As she left Father Reyes's rectory, the sky was clearing after a morning rain. Sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the city streets. Maria paused for a moment, looking up at that patch of blue, feeling something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it. After years of struggling, of putting one foot in front of the other, of doing what needed to be done without complaint or self-pity, Maria Alvarez felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. And in that moment, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, running the foundation, fighting the system, preserving dignity in a world that so often denied it, she would face them as she had faced everything else in her life. One day at a time, one person at a time, with unwavering kindness and quiet strength. Starting, as always, with breakfast. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with friends who might appreciate it too. Your support means everything and helps bring more stories like this to life.